I'd like to start out, as I did last year, talk about IT productivity, the effects of IT on our overall productivity here in the United States. This information, actually, I just updated it last week, comes from the U.S. Department of Labor. And what this shows is the overall annual productivity rate, the average productivity rate that we have had in the U.S. from 2000 to 2009. And you can see that last year was about 2.5. It's actually ratcheted up a bit. Last year we had quite an increase in productivity. This is the most recent update. It goes through the end of 2009. They actually have it more recent than this, but not in the detail that I'm about to go through. What this shows is that overall productivity is made up of labor composition, which is the skill and education of the labor force, and that is surveyed quarterly. They have a way of calibrating that. It is made up of the value of the non-depreciated capital goods, non-IT capital goods in our economy. These are like property, plant, equipment, and IT capital. All of those hardware and software investments that companies have that they've capitalized and not yet depreciated. And then another factor called multi-factor productivity, which is not the actual value of the technology, what it costs to buy, but it's how people use it. So it's not the value of Outlook or Excel, it's the way in which people use that in their jobs. And so when you look at the stack, 70% of overall labor productivity comes from the use of information technology. That is a staggering number. This is true over this 10-year period. And so the message that I'd like to leave you with on this slide as we enter the presentation is that not all companies share equally in these productivity gains. There are some companies that far exceed the average and others that are far below. What's common among those that exceed it is that the relationship between the IT department and the business is very good. There's never any finger pointing. There's some mutual respect there. And conversely, what's common among companies who are well below the average is that just the opposite is true. There's a lot of finger pointing. To me, what makes that difference is that the people in companies that are successful at this understand this chart. They know how important IT is to overall success in their business. So they're willing to invest the time to understand how to use information technology and how to work with their IT departments. And so that's why I wanted to share this with you. This really is an important topic. So with that, let's take a look at the agenda for today. First thing I'd like to do is take a look back at 2010. I'll share with you the forecast that I gave here last year and see how well we did. I always like to do that when people give me forecasts. I like to see whether they're optimistic or pessimistic. So the next time I know how to discount whatever they say. So we're going to take a look and see how we did. And then I'll share with you our forecast for 2011 and actually out to 2014. So after we talk about the spending statistics, we'll talk about some trends. Some of these are familiar to you, but there may be some new aspects to this. It's leveraging social media and transparency, a big trend that we're seeing at Gartner that offers a lot of opportunities. And finally, emerging technologies, always one of my favorite areas. All those neat new gadgets that are coming out. So, how well did we do? The 2010 spending forecast. Now, this is the very same chart that I gave last year. And for those of you who are having a hard time reading this, don't worry, because the presentation and all the slides and all the detail will be made available to you. So you don't have to take too many notes. I'm going to be going through a lot of statistics. But again, all of you have the opportunity to get a copy of this. But what this chart shows is the overall spending trend going back to 2001. And you can see, as we talked about last year, 2009 was the worst year-over-year spending change in IT on record. Even worse than the tech recession back in 2001. And so last year, when I stood on the stage, I tried not to look it, but I was pretty scared. I thought, coming out of 2009, there were some pretty wild things happening. And there were also conversations about double dips, and as we entered the year, we had the euro crisis and other things, but we were able to work through all of that. And so our forecast last year, I'm going to use some of this technology here, but this was right off the chart from last year. We had the 4.6 and 2.3. The 4.6 increase, our forecast, was in total IT spending worldwide. This includes consumer spending and enterprise spending. The enterprise portion of this the total was 3.4 trillion. The enterprise portion was about 70% of that. And that's the business between IT providers, hardware, software, and service companies, and businesses. So this excludes consumer spending. Consumers about 30%. So coming into 2010, we were forecasting a 4.6% increase in total spending worldwide and a 2.3% increase in enterprise spending. We actually, and these figures are just out now, wound up a bit better than that. Now some of this was influenced by the value of the dollar. After QE2, the dollar dipped a little bit, so we got a little bit of an improvement in these numbers because our forecasts are in dollars. But I think you can see that we came reasonably close and also not overly optimistic about this. We forecasted a lowercase v, and in fact we had a lowercase v. So I think overall it was a reasonable projection. So now as we take a look at 2011, let's see how we move on from here. I put the same forecast, or the actual numbers, from this year on the board, and now we'll take a look at the new forecast. So we've actually increased our forecast from last year to total spending at 5.1% increase, and enterprise spending actually is going to be very strong, 4.3% increase. We see a lot of companies investing. Let's look a little some more at the detail behind this in 2011. And actually going out from 2011 through 2014, spending is pretty strong, pretty solid. It'll average about 4.5% across all the technology categories. It's a pretty good forecast. Just a little bit more detail. This looks at the actual spending for 2010 and forecasted spending in 2011 for hardware, software, IT services, and telecom. You can see that the growth rates for hardware and software are nice and strong. Services, still pretty good. There's been a sort of a dip in the telecom, mostly because of landline voice. Still the biggest component of telecom, even though within telecom, all those mobile devices are really taking off. So we're seeing a big increase in mobile device sales, but it's offset by a decline in fixed landline services. So that's a little bit about some of the details.